Greetings, everyone. Gul'dan here again with another episode of Lore of Warcraft. We are on Chapter 12 of Rise of the Horde, so stay a while and listen to this one. We did just have a milestone moment for a couple reasons. One, Ner'zhul realizes Kil'jaeden is bad. Two, that was a moment in which our paths dovetailed. What we read in Chronicles and what we're reading in this book are clearly meeting up, like we had in the beginning. And three, it was the halfway part of the point of the book. So we're now at the beginning of the second half of the book. Let's find out how it goes with Chapter 12. We are all weak in one way or another. It does not matter the species. Sometimes that weakness is a strength in disguise. That's a highly quoted line. Sometimes it is our utter undoing. Sometimes it is both. The wise man understands his weakness and seeks to find a lesson from it. The fool lets it control and destroy him. And sometimes the wise man is a fool. Also highly quoted. Old Thrall is an inspirational poster maker. As he rode back atop Sky Chaser, hands so cold that he wondered if he would ever be able to unclench them, entwined in the thick black fur, Ner'zhul wished for the dark night to swallow him. How could he return to his people, knowing what he had done to them? On the other hand, how could he flee, and where could he possibly go that Kil'jaeden would not find him? He longed bitterly for the courage to take the ritual knife he carried at all times and drive it into his heart, but knew that he could not. Suicide was not regarded with honor among his people. It was a coward's answer to the problems that came at him. He would not be permitted to live on as a spirit if he took that seductive way to escape the horrors that confronted him. He could continue to pretend that he suspected nothing, and even perhaps subtly undercut Kil'jaeden. Despite his massive powers, there had been no evidence that the so-called Beautiful One had the ability to read thoughts. The thought brightened Ner'zhul somewhat. Yes, he could mitigate the damage this interloper was trying to do to his people. That was how he could continue to serve. Exhausted both physically and emotionally, Ner'zhul stumbled into his tent in that faint hour before dawn, looking forward to simply collapsing on the skins and sleeping in an effort to forget, for at least a brief while, the agony of what he had brought about. Instead, a bright light nearly blinded him, and he fell to his knees. "You would betray me, then," said the Beautiful One. Ner'zhul threw up his hands, trying vainly to protect his eyes from the awesome radiance. His stomach roiled, and he feared he was about to be sick in his terror. The light dimmed somewhat, and he lowered his hands. Standing beside Kil'jaeden was Ner'zhul's apprentice, grinning darkly. "Gul'dan," whispered Ner'zhul sickly, "what have you done?" "I have informed Kil'jaeden of a rodent," Gul'dan said calmly. That dreadful smile never left his face. "And he will decide what to do with the vermin who would so turn against him." There was still snow on Gul'dan's shoulders. Dully, Ner'zhul realized what had happened. His apprentice, hungry for power, how was it Ner'zhul had closed his eyes to the obvious for so long, had followed him, had heard the ancestors' words, and still he clung to Kil'jaeden, after hearing the same things Ner'zhul had heard? For a moment, his own fear and selfishness went away, and Ner'zhul felt only a wave of pity for an orc who had fallen so far. Time out. Alright. I'm back. Sorry, guys. Had to check that. My wife is out, and she is at the store. And I'm sure she's asking questions about whatever, and if I don't answer, it will turn into a phone call. Which would be harder to do in the middle of this video. Okay. Sorry. And for a moment, his own fear and selfishness went away, and Ner'zhul felt only a wave of pity for an orc who had fallen so far. Okay. It wounds me, Kil'jaeden said. Ner'zhul looked at him, startled. I chose you, Ner'zhul. I gave you my powers. I showed you what you need to do to advance your people and ensure that they are never second in this world. Ner'zhul spoke without thinking. You have deceived me. You have sent me false visions. You have maligned the ancestors and all they stood for. I don't know why you are doing this, but I know that it is not out of love for my people. And yet they flourish. They are united for the first time in many centuries. United under a lie, Ner'zhul said. He was giddy in his rebellion. It felt good. Perhaps if he continued, Kil'jaeden would lose patience with him and slay him, and Ner'zhul's problem would be solved. But Kil'jaeden did not respond with deadly fury as Ner'zhul hoped he would. Instead, the being sighed deeply and shook his head like a parent disappointed in a wayward child. You may yet regain my favor, Ner'zhul, Kil'jaeden said. I have a task for you. If you complete it, your lapse of faith will be overlooked. Ner'zhul's lips moved. He wanted to shout out his rebellion again, but this time the words would not come. He realized that the moment had passed. He did not want to die any more than any sane living being wanted to die, and so he remained silent. What happened with the Frostwolf chieftain troubles me, Kil'jaeden continued. Not least because he is not the only one who has murmured against what is happening. There are others. The one who wields the Doom Hammer, some among the Bladewind and Redwalker clans as well. It would be one thing if these opposing voices belonged to those of no consequence, but many of them do not. There must be no risk to the success of my plan. Therefore, I will guarantee their obedience. It is not enough for them to swear loyalty, Kil'jaeden continued. He tapped his cheek with one long red finger thoughtfully. Too many seem enamored of changing what honor and oath mean. We must ensure their cooperation for now and for all time. Gul'dan's small eyes glinted. What is it you suggest, Great One? Kil'jaeden smiled at Gul'dan. Already Ner'zhul could see the bond between them, see how like Kil'jaeden Gul'dan was in a way that Ner'zhul had never been. Kil'jaeden had been forced to use the seductive lies and trickery in order to pull Ner'zhul to his cause. With Gul'dan he could speak openly. There is such a way, Kil'jaeden said, speaking to both orc shaman now. A way to make them forever bound to us. Forever loyal. Ner'zhul had thought that he had become inured to horror after what the ancestors had revealed to him, but now he realized that he was capable of experiencing an entirely new level of shock as he listened to Kil'jaeden outline the plan. Forever bound, forever loyal, forever enslaved. He looked up into Kil'jaeden's blazing eyes and words would not come. A nod would suffice, he knew, but he could not even bring himself to do that. Instead, he simply stared transfixed like a bird before a snake. Kil'jaeden heaved a deep sigh. Ah, you refused your chance at redemption in my eyes, then. As he heard Kil'jaeden speak, it was as if a spell had been removed from Ner'zhul. The words that had been stuck in his throat came rushing out, and although he knew they would mean his doom, the shaman made no move to stop them. I refuse utterly to forever doom my people to a life of slavery, he cried. Kil'jaeden listened and nodded his massive head. This is your choice. You have also chosen the consequences. Know this, shaman. Your choice averts nothing. My desires will still be carried out. Your people will still be slaves. But instead of leading them and lingering in my favor, you will be forced to be a helpless observer.
I think that will be sweeter than if I simply slew you.
Ner'zhul opened his mouth to speak, but he could not. Kil'jaeden narrowed his great eyes, and Ner'zhul could not even move. Even his heart slamming wildly in his chest beat only by the will of Lord Kil'jaeden, and he knew it. How had he been such a gullible fool? How had he not seen through the lies? How could he have mistaken an illusion sent by this monster to be the spirit of his beloved mate? Tears welled in his eyes and slipped down his cheeks, only, he knew, because Kil'jaeden permitted it. Kil'jaeden smiled at him, then slowly, deliberately turned his attention to Gul'dan. Even in his wretched state, Ner'zhul took the faintest comfort in the knowledge that he had not turned to Kil'jaeden with the expression Gul'dan now wore, that of a hungry pup eager for praise.
There is no need to trap you with pretty lies, is there, my new tool? Said Kil'jaeden, speaking almost fondly to Gul'dan. You do not shrink from the truth. Indeed, no, Lord. I live to do your bidding.
So there you go. That implies that Gul'dan has not been working for him all along, which is in huge contrast to Chronicles. But I guess it just syncs up with the other contrast from before. Kil'jaeden chuckled.
If I will do away with lies, so must you. You live for power. You hunger for it. You thirst for it. And over the last few months your skill has grown to where I can make proper use of you. Ours is not a partnership of adoration or respect, but one of convenience and selfish benefit, which means that it will likely last.
Various emotions flitted across Gul'dan's face. He did not seem to know how to react to the words, and Ner'zhul took pleasure in his former apprentice's discomfiture.
As you will,
Gul'dan stammered finally, then with more confidence,
Tell me what you would have me do, and I swear it will be done. You have no doubt perceived that I wish to exterminate the Draenei. Why I do so is of no concern of yours. You need only know that I wish it. The orcs are doing moderately well in this, but they can do better. They shall do better. A warrior is only as good as his weapons, and Gul'dan, I intend to give you and your people weapons such as you have never conceived. It will take a little time. You must be educated first, before you are fit to teach the others. Are you ready and willing?
Gul'dan's eyes shone.
Begin the lessons, glorious one, and you will see how apt a pupil of yours I am.
Kil'jaeden laughed. Durotan was covered with blood, much of it his own. What had gone wrong? Everything had progressed as normal. They had found the hunting party, descended upon them, initiated the attack, and waited for the shaman to use their magic to fight the Draenei. They did not do so. Instead, Frostwolf after Frostwolf fell beneath the shining blades and blue-white magics of the Draenei. At one point, fighting for his very life, Durotan saw that Drekthar was fighting desperately, using nothing but his staff. What had happened? Why had the shaman not come to his aid? What was Drekthar thinking? He could wield a staff hardly better than a child. Why did he not use his magic? The Draenei fought furiously, seizing the opportunities the shaman's inexplicable inaction had given them. They pressed their attack harder than Durotan had ever seen, their eyes glinting as perhaps the first time they sensed victory. The grass was slippery with blood, and Durotan's feet went out from under him. He fell, and his attackers raised his sword. This was the moment, then. He would die in glorious battle, except he did not feel that this was a glorious battle. By instinct alone he raised his axe to parry the blow that would come, although his arm had been deeply cut at the joint of the armor and his limb quivered. He looked up into the eyes of the one who would slay him, and recognized Restylon. At that moment the Draenei captain of the guard's own glowing blue eyes widened in recognition, and he stayed his blow. Durotan gasped for breath, trying to summon the energy to rise and continue to fight. Restylon uttered something in his ululating tongue, and every Draenei halted almost in mid-swing. A ululating tongue, huh? Try to see. As Duratan got to his feet, he realized that there were only a handful of his warriors left alive. 2 more moments of battle and the Draenei would have slaughtered the entire party with only 2 or 3 casualties on their own side. Rastalon whirled on Duratan. Various expressions warred on his ugly face. Compassion, disgust, regret, determination. For the act of compassion and honor you showed our prophet Duratan, son of Garad. You and those of your clan who yet live have been spared. Treat your wounded and return to your homes, but do not think to receive such mercy from us again. Honor has been satisfied. Duratan weaved as if he had had too much to drink as blood dripped from deep wounds. He forced himself to stay on his feet by sheer will as the Draenei turned and disappeared over the horizon. Once they were out of sight, he could force his legs to hold him no longer, and he fell to his knees. Several ribs had been cracked or broken, and each inhalation sent a stabbing pain through him.
Duratan!
It was Draka. She too had been badly injured, but her voice was strong. Relief washed over Duratan. Thank the ancestors she yet lived. Drekthar hurried up to him and placed his hands on Duratan's heart, murmuring under his breath. Warmth flooded Duratan and the pain eased. He took a deep, nourished breath.
At least they will let me heal,
said Drekthar, so softly that Duratan was scarce certain he heard the words.
Tend to the others, and then we will speak,
Duratan said. Drekthar nodded, not meeting his chieftain's eyes. He and the other shaman hastened to magically heal what wounds they could and treat with salves and bandages what they could not. Duratan still had injuries, but nothing life-threatening, and he assisted the shaman. When Duratan had done all he could, he rose and looked around. No fewer than 15 bodies were stiffening on the green grass, including Rokkar, his second. Duratan shook his head in stunned disbelief. He would have to return with litters to bear the fallen back to their lands. They would burn on a pyre, their bodies given to fire, their ashes to air, to be consumed by water and earth. Their spirits would go to Oshugun, and the shaman would converse with them on matters of profound importance. Or would they? Something terrible had happened, and it was time he found out what. Sudden anger flooded him at the waist. Despite what the ancestors had told him, something inside Duratan continued to whisper that this attack on the Draenei was a grave mistake. He whirled on Drekthar, and with a deep growl, seized the smaller orc where he sat gulping water, and hauled him to his feet.
This was a slaughter,
Duratan cried, shaking him furiously.
15 of our kin lay dead before us. The earth drinks deeply of their blood, and I never saw you or any of the others lend your skill to the fight.
For a moment Drekthar could not speak. The meadow was deathly silent as every frostwolf watched the confrontation. Then in a faint voice Drekthar replied,
The elements, they would not come this time.
Duratan's eyes narrowed. Still clutching Drekthar by the front of his leather jerkin, he demanded of the wide-eyed, silent shaman,
Is this true? They would not lend their aid to the battle?
Looking stunned and sick, the shaman nodded. One said in a quavering voice,
It is true, great chieftain. I asked all of them in turn. They said it was out of balance, and they would no longer permit us to use their powers.
Duratan's shock was broken by an angry hiss. He turned to see Draka's scowling face.
This is more than a sign. This is a shout, a battle cry that what we are doing is wrong.
Slowly trying to comprehend the magnitude of what had happened, Duratan nodded. If it were not for the mercy Rastalon had shown him, he and every last member of the war party would be lying on the earth, their bodies growing colder by the moment. The elements had refused their assistance. They had condemned what the shaman were asking of them. Duratan took a deep breath and shook his head as if to physically shake away the dark thoughts.
Let us get the injured back to their homes as swiftly as we may, and then I will send out letters. If what I fear is true, that it is not only the shaman of the Frostwolf clan who are shunned by the elements for what we are doing to the Draenei, then we must confront Ner'zhul.
Okay, so we're getting a little bit. So it's now this important part has happened. Most likely with Gul'dan's aid, if not completely at the hand of Gul'dan, something has happened to completely now throw the elements off. So now the only key thing we're missing is the red pox, and all we've done is sort of shuffle things around. Gul'dan, according to Chronicles, was originally working the entire time and secretly a warlock all along. In this one, he just sort of becomes that along the way. Ner'zhul's the original corrupt one. And even that, he's not really fully corrupt. He's just duped. we're still missing the Red Pox, but this again is going to drive them into further desperation, whereas before, in order to really unite them, they had a massacred town. That still may or may not occur. The only really thing that just can't be argued as a shuffling of events to create a little bit more cohesive story is you can't argue that the Red Pox killed Garadar. So now that's the real only sticking point that's going to have anything of any import, like lasting. Everything else, it's just, okay, it's not quite happening in the same order, but it's all happening one way or another within the same chunk of time. All right, another episode in the pipes, 5x5, despite life technical difficulties. Not technical difficulties, just I thought, okay, this is a nice quiet time to make a video, and I forgot to bring my phone, so then I couldn't discreetly check. Then it starts storming outside. You might be able to hear that in the background. So if you made it this far, you're one of the true ones. I appreciate you. Look forward to the next episode of Lore of Warcraft. Thanks.